So we started with politics, but the good thing is being from Ireland, even though I work in London, no one can blame me for Brexit today, so that's a good thing. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. Am I in the light? Good. So I've been told to stand in the light, which means I can't see anyone, but it's all good. So yeah, I've come here from London today. It's a pleasure to be in Berlin for only the second time in my life, which I'm extremely embarrassed about. But yeah, I was here in May for the first time, and I will be here a lot more in the coming years, I think, because my brother has just moved here. He doesn't have any friends, so if anyone can take him under your wing this evening, I think that would be really useful. So yes, I'm here to talk about Verv, and the title begins Blux by Verv because Blux is our token. I'm not going to talk much about that this evening. This is definitely not designed to be a pitch at all. I just want to talk about the untapped data sets that we have in our home and how we can unlock those with AI in order to monetize them. So basically, we've created a new energy marketplace that is powered by data. So our overall mission is to bring everybody's electricity bills down to zero. So as Sheridan kindly said, my background was at a company called National Instruments, which is a big data acquisition company, so massive kind of NASDAQ American company. And when I was working there, I was responsible for the London area, and Transport for London that runs the Underground was one of my clients. And one of the things that we did there with data, which I thought was really interesting, we sampled the voltage on the underground lines. And as you saw that voltage change over time, that showed that the line was starting to degrade. So you could predict the line failing before it actually happened. So now the tube doesn't like go out of service and everyone in London kills each other. Instead, you send someone out in the middle of the night 3 weeks before it breaks. So that's kind of my background in data acquisition before I came into Verv. So I want to talk a little bit as well about our partnership with Ocean. So is Trent here? I hope you don't mind, I've screenshotted you. This is a really awesome talk of his on token design as optimization design. And we actually used this as a seed for a hack day at Verv, and we got everyone to design their own incentive functions. But it's actually a really, he explains the importance of data better than I've seen it explained before. And I think there's a way you phrase it, it's like the unreasonable effectiveness of data. And that this isn't part of the presentation. and that couldn't be more true. And I'll let you go and watch the talk yourself, but he explains how important it is to have a huge volume of data. Without that, your algorithms are basically pointless. You can have the best algorithm in the world, but if you don't have the right data to train it on, then you're not going to get results any better than they had many years ago. So I would encourage you to take a look at that. And I think the thing to remember, I suppose, in terms of how we're working together and what I talk about, it's so important. This is people's technically personal data that I'm talking about trading for electricity, which is a bit of an interesting concept in itself. But the safety and security in the way that that data is traded is absolutely paramount to people taking on board what we're saying. And so that's why the Ocean partnership is so important, due to the way in which they've created this environment in which we will be able to trade data in a safe and a secure way, and a way that benefits the consumer. So let me talk about Verv and the beginning. So Verv is a little hub that sits on top of your electricity meter or smart meter, and it samples the current and voltage coming into your home at up to 1 million times a second. So super quick. I'm sure most people have heard of smart meters. Yeah? Smart meter, yeah? So that samples once every 6 to 10 seconds. So crap data. At Verv, we've got good data. So when you're sampling at 1,000,000 times a second, there's some really clever things you can do. So if I make the analogy of, if I take this microphone and hold it out into this crowd, if you all speak at one time, we can use machine learning to separate your voices based on their characteristics. So women will sound different from men. Some people have high voices, some people have low voices. It's the exact same machine learning algorithms that we use to separate out the appliances. So it's like they're all talking at once. This little current clamp here is the microphone, and the appliances now look like this. Oh dear. Sorry, I sent a PDF. This is totally my bad. Yay, okay, so this is how different the appliances look. So this is a toaster, this is a microwave, this is a food mixer. Very, very different. For the purposes of the slide, we've put them side by side. In practice, they're all over the top of each other and we filter them, but it's just so you can see how different they look. And as these appliances start to break down, they look different as well. So as your washing machine starts to fail, the data that we're sampling shows us that, for example, the drain cycle portion takes a little bit longer, and we're like, oh, that's starting to block 5-6 weeks you've got maybe before that floods your kitchen, for example. So it's such a rich data set that when you apply AI to it, you can do some really clever things. Oops. So this is an incredibly busy, awful slide, and it needs to be changed. But basically, this is making the point of all of the different companies that are super interested in this data. So because we can tell, for example, how many times your washing machine's been turned on, we know when you need washing powder. So no more Amazon dash buttons, if anyone's a fan of the Andrex button, for example. The other interesting application on this slide is insurance. So if we know that your appliance is going to break down before it breaks down, you're not then going to put another load of washing on and turn it on when you know your kitchen's going to get flooded. Therefore, you're less likely to make a claim. Therefore, the insurance company will give you an upside. So your data is being sold right now for money. You're not getting the money. In this situation, we're looking at you being in control of which parts of your data you sell. You probably don't care if someone knows if your washing machine's going to break, right? But you need to get the upside for that information. And that's the whole premise of how this is built. And just a quick mention on Gdpr. So it's the thing when I start talking about data, people start screaming, what about Gdpr? But we are lucky in that we kind of started the domestic part of the business in 2015. So Gdpr was already being talked about. So we have built that in by design. And in fact, Gdpr is the thing that has enabled this business model. So if it wasn't for Gdpr, then your data would still be getting sold everywhere. We have a situation where we are empowering the customer if they wish to sell their personal data in exchange for energy effectively. And they don't have to, or they can if they want. They can opt out at any time, and we have a method in which they can delete access to that whenever they wish. So, I've talked a lot about the consumer side and the kind of reduced energy bills, and also how the data can be monetized, and also actually as well about the retail value chain. So I think the insurance side is pretty obvious. Obviously, appliance manufacturers like Hotpoint or Morphy Richards want to know why their washing machines are breaking down. If they have millions of homes that have their machine in, and we can package up that data in a super useful way, they're willing to pay money for that, which is obviously good for everyone here. Then the other side, which I find even more interesting, is the energy system value chain, because if you think about, in Germany here, you've had it, like everywhere's had it, with more and more disparate sources of energy like solar panels and wind turbines coming onto the grid. There are blackouts, there's problems with supply and demand, there's problems with balancing the load. And we always give the example of like the advert break on the TV during the World Cup, where in the UK anyway, everyone goes and makes a cup of tea. All the kettles in the neighbourhood go on, and the grid, if not even the neighbourhood, all the kettles in the country go on, and the grid hits its peak. So now the UK has to go and buy excess energy from somebody else, and that's really expensive. But if using Verv, we can see and predict that this is going to happen. One, you could either buy the energy in advance, but we could get even more clever. Let's see if you stick with me on this one. But if your fridge was connected with a smart plug to the wall, we could automate your fridge being turned off for that 1 hour where everyone's making a cup of tea. That if we do that across the whole country, everyone's fridge goes off. The grid doesn't have to go and buy a load of extra energy from France or somewhere else. And you should receive the upside for that. If you're helping to balance the grid and saving the country, or saving the grid, depends if the country owns the grid, you know, millions of pounds, why should you not receive the upside to do that? And you don't give a shit if your fridge is off for an hour. Who cares? Like, it's not going to change the temperature of the fridge, and it kind of doesn't matter. It definitely depends on your views on these things, but we can debate it after over a beer. So I'll talk a little bit more now. So I've talked about the data trading side, and I really wanted to lead with that this evening because that's what most people here are interested in, is applying machine learning to huge data sets to do really clever things. But with that forecasting that we can do, the peer-to-peer energy trading side is also super interesting. So does anyone here have like renewable energy source in their house? So like a solar panel on the roof, or a windmill in the garden? A few dotted around. So I personally don't. I live in London, so I don't even own my own roof. I'm the bottom floor flat. And I say that's a lot of people in Berlin as well. But my neighbour, who bought their house probably in the 60s for very little money and has plenty of extra cash, has got a whole roof full of solar panels. So she'll actually generate double the energy she needs in a year through her solar panels. She might have a battery to store some of it, but on the whole, it's too much. So she sells it back to the grid. I wonder what the feed-in tariff is in Germany. Does anyone know how much you get for pushing back up to the grid? So in the UK, it's like 5 pence. So let's call it 6 cents per kilowatt hour of energy. But on my bill, I should have brought a bill with me, what I pay is 15 pence per kilowatt hour. So I'd be much better buying it from Mrs. Jones 3 doors down for 10 pence per kilowatt hour. Everyone's a winner. So we can do this with smart meter data. So we can see from the smart meter some of this. But the key with Verv is the point that we can forecast what you're going to use so much more accurately than a smart meter can. So because we know it's the kettle that you've turned on and you're going to go to work in like 10 minutes and you're going to be gone for the rest of the day, so you need no energy, versus the washing machine that you've just turned on and you're going to need X amount of energy for the next 2 hours, it's very, very different. And if it's the washing machine, then we don't run, Verv automates it, obviously, but we get the Verv to buy the energy in advance that you need from Mrs. Jones 3 doors down. She's out all day, it's a sunny day, she doesn't need her solar panel, and like I say, everyone's a winner. So that's where the forecasting comes in. Then we can also predict what the clouds are going to do. So you can use satellites to predict cloud coverage. Up to 48 hours, you'll get to like 70% accuracy. So now we know how much these prosumers, as we call them, so producer consumers, are going to generate from their homes. So how much Mrs. Jones' solar panel is going to generate. And we can then say, is it a good time to sell? Or in fact, it's going to be cloudy for the next 3 days. Charge up your battery. And of course, we integrate with the battery as well. And we put all of that together to decide, should Mrs. Jones sell or should she not? If she should sell, we then have a kind of bid and ask among all the little Verv boxes to get the neighbour that's going to pay the highest price. So she gets the best price and the neighbour is always paying less than what they pay from the grid. Who's lost? I got everyone. we can discuss more after. I know it's hard to talk about in 20 minutes, but stick with me on it. So that's the little kind of micro generation communities that we're building together. And as a sideline, of course, this is on the blockchain. It's the best technology in order to act as a distributed ledger for us right now. This is a disparate group of producers and consumers, and it allows us to bring them all together, record all the transactions in a trustless environment, and also keep the cost to a minimum. So if we were to partner up with someone to have some big database to record all these transactions, whenever you're talking pennies in energy transactions, you can't really be affording to have a cut going to someone as well. So that's the reason it's the right implementation right now. We're building on Ethereum, which we can debate if anyone wants to talk a bit more about that. But I would say energy trading will in the future evolve onto a different platform, I imagine. And you might think it all sounds very futuristic, but we've already done it. So this is a housing estate in Hackney. So Hackney is in East London. It's where the Olympics were, if anyone remembers that, in 2012. And on this estate, it's called Bannister House, and there's actually 17 of these massive tower blocks. And the residents all got together and crowdfunded solar panels on the roofs of the buildings. Sounds amazing, right? However, the solar panels are actually used to power the lights in the corridors, some lifts, and a community centre that no one ever uses. The rest is sold back to the grid at 5 pence per kilowatt hour. So what makes this even worse is that not only are most people paying 15 pence per kilowatt hour, but there's actually a lot of people on prepay meters due to credit. If you don't have a credit rating, then you can't pay monthly and you have to pay more. So we have the people who are poorest in our society paying the most for energy when there is solar panels on the roofs of their building. So with that in mind, I think it's no wonder that we have 2.5 million people living in the UK in fuel poverty. And it's such a simple problem to solve. So that's why I'm so proud that this is the first place that we did the trade, and it was the first UK peer-to-peer energy trade on the blockchain back in April. This is the team that made it happen, some of them anyway. And we basically virtually allocated bits of solar panel to different homes, and there's 40 homes in total. Some of them are kind of fake prosumers with the solar panels, and some only consume. So it's super exciting to have got the ball rolling on that already. So I'm not going to talk too much about this, just know that the marketplace for transactive energy and related data is expected to reach 5 billion by 2025. So it's a super fast growing and exciting marketplace to be in, and we are of course talking to anyone who is in a similar field and would like to partner in some way. Do come and speak to me. And just to reiterate, the goal is to bring energy bills down to zero, if you want, through exchanging data for electricity, and also to allow households with solar panels to sell their energy to their neighbours at the best value for both parties. And GDPR at the core, keeping that everywhere so everyone remembers. And with that, yeah, my contact details are there. If we don't get a chance to talk tonight, do feel free to reach out to me. I hope it was vaguely interesting for everyone, and thanks again for having me.
Thank you, Maria. Stay there, you're not done.
Oh, questions, sorry, I forgot we had time for questions.
You will take questions.
Yes, of course, of course.
So, I see a few hands up.
How do you differentiate, for example, brands? Let's say someone can has a Bosch dishwasher and someone else can have some other brand. How do you know all of them have create the same current?
Yeah, so interestingly, some of them do look quite different. If they look the same, it's because, so the signature is based on the circuit board inside the machine. If the circuit board is the same for two brands, it's because they OEM it, if that, we call it OEM, I don't know if that translates, but basically Bosch might buy the same circuit board as Hotpoint, and if they do, they will probably both fail for the same reason. So the failures are kind of likely to not differentiate necessarily by brand. It's a really interesting point though. Right now we get people to input the brand and we're trying to learn whether we can differentiate it. Certainly hair straighteners, we can tell the difference between the brands. It's very clear for some reason. Washing machines, we need a greater data set. So over time we'll hopefully evolve to that, but that's a really, really good question.
No question?
There's a microphone, but you can probably shout. Oh, sorry. Okay.
I used to work in the environment sector in Australia actually when they first started rolling out the smart meters, where the power grid there always breaks down in the summer because of aircon. And there was a bit of a disastrous rollout. They didn't really tell people why they were doing it, what benefit it was going to bring. Everyone was just suspicious of them. But I was thinking with your idea, is the intention to at some point involve the power companies more and try and make it a bigger scale, or just bypass them completely and get everything decentralized and local in each case?
That's a really amazing question, and I'm very conscious of the fact that I'm being recorded right now. I think it's easy to say, look, this is something, you know, let's, in a Bitcoin way, let's take back the banks, let's take back energy. But in terms of actually rolling this out and it actually benefiting the people like I showed in that slide, we have to work together. And the big energy companies, and you're kind of referring to power, so the grid as well, they all know this is coming. They're all hiring blockchain developers. You just have to look at the adverts page on their website. And so it's really important, I think, that especially at this stage, let's work together and let's make it happen. And if that means that, like, for example, we're reducing an energy bill of someone that really needs it by 20% rather in the next 2 years, rather than waiting 10 years to change the world, I think it's better to take baby steps and evolve.
So my question is about the P2P distribution and the trading. So if you are offering the opportunity to sell power to your neighbour, which sounds like an amazing arbitrage opportunity, do you have to build your own transmission from neighbour to neighbour in order to stop uploading to the grid and downloading from the grid?
That's a really awesome question. The example that I like to give with this is, if you think about, if you and I were standing at opposite ends of a giant pool of water, and you have a glass of water and my glass is empty, and I really want a drink of water, and I say, look, I'll give you 50 cents for your glass of water, and you say no problem, and you throw yours into the pool, and I take mine out of the pool. I've got my glass of water. The pool still had as much as it had in the first place, and you don't have a glass of water. So it's probably an oversimplification for this audience. I spoke to a less technical audience and got a clap for that analogy once. So short answer, no, it's using the existing infrastructure, and the next thing you're going to say is, but you have to pay for that. So yes, we do. And that's why we are working closely with the network providers in this trial in the UK. We have trials in 2 other countries that I can't mention yet. I really thought I was going to be able to talk about one tonight. I'm going to tell Trent on the sly, but you can't tell anyone until next week. So we're going to learn so much by doing these trials in different countries. And I would, when we started at Verv on the plan for world domination, you say, okay, we're going to start in the UK. Once we've conquered the UK, then we'll go to Europe, and then we'll go here and we'll go there. That's not what's going to happen. We'll trial in a range of countries, and there are other countries that are so much further ahead of the UK in the way in which they manage their energy resources that I imagine it'll be somewhere else that we roll out first. But really excellent question, and definitely something that we are learning through trials like this one in Hackney.